success manager here at Mintel, which IU has a subscription to. So I service both our academic clients as well as our agency and media clients. So what I find so great about that, and especially when I'm talking to students, is that, the data, the database, the insights, all that we provide are all the exact same insights, data that some of the biggest brand names, clients that we have are using as well, to make those real world decisions. So you faculty, librarians, and students, you're all getting this, real world data, and these students are getting exposure to, data and analytics world, by using Mintel. So as Alana mentioned, I'm going to go through a few different things. So I'm going to start with this PowerPoint and just do some of the demonstrations of our data. And then near the end, I'll actually get into the platform and show some navigation tactics, how to find this COVID data, all that good stuff. So, we'll look at Mintel Reports, which is the product that IU subscribes to, and what those are in case you're just generally unfamiliar. I'll talk about how Mintel has adjusted its research strategy as COVID came about last year. And we'll look at some COVID trackers that we've produced. We'll look at our actual analysts and insights. In this case, I chose the Future of Food Service 2021. This was a report that we just published a few weeks ago. I thought was a good example because what industry has changed really or been more affected than food service when it comes to COVID. And then again, we'll look at the Mintel platform near the end so that you can understand how to get in yourself right after this presentation and find those insights. So in general, Mintel is a global market intelligence agency. So we study consumer behavior, and this is across 86 countries across the globe. To sum it up in a sentence, what we like to say is we're experts in what consumers want and why. So we're always, measuring changes in consumer behavior, pre-COVID and post-COVID. But we're taking kind of an even closer look now and, in the coming weeks, in the coming year, to see how COVID is affecting consumer behavior in general, consumer behavior in specific categories, and all these different areas that, have really been affected. And just as a general look at different Mintel products, this Mintel Reports at the top left, again, is what you have access to. But just know Mintel offers a variety of other products. We look at trends tracking. We do direct marketing analysis and competitive analysis. And we also do innovative product collection across the globe. So really a big scope of things that we're looking at. And all these products are ultimately coming together and being included in these Mintel reports, where applicable. So what are Mintel reports? As you can see here, they're market intelligence reports connecting primary data, so surveys that Mintel is administering ourselves, but then also secondary data. So we use third-party resources like IRI for sales data. We use the US Census Bureau to get a feel for what the population looks like in the US and in different markets, both quantitative and qualitative data. And you can see there that we're publishing about 400 reports annually across the Americas. So these surveys we're administering are analysts within each category that we have within our reports product. We have a set or an analyst who is that category expert. You'll see some of those categories that are in your subscription in just a second. But these analysts are putting together these survey questions based on what we need to know about consumers in a certain market, what our clients want to know as well. We like to take their input to see what's important for them when it comes to for example, the cheese category is a report that we do that's very popular. So these surveys are being administered. It's by a third-party resource as well called Lightspeed. What they do is just help us administer the surveys, but everything else is owned. All the survey data is owned by Mintel. So these surveys are going to 2,000 consumers 18 and up with access to internet. So again, I find that fact important when we're talking about COVID, because what was, a benefit to Mintel when COVID was coming about was that our research strategy didn't have to change too much. We were already administering our surveys through the internet. We didn't have to worry about, consumers taking our surveys in a public forum, going out and not being safe. all of these surveys were still able to be administered properly, and how we've been doing it for over 40 years, essentially. So we do have some surveys that are administered to consumers under 18, just not as many, knowing that those consumers need to get consent from their parents. For example, we have a marketing to Gen Z report. So, the bottom half of who we consider Generation Z is going to be under 18. So we have a few reports here and there that look at younger consumers, but most of them standard are going to be 18 and up. And then those 2,000 consumers are going to be representative of the US population. So in terms of gender, race, age, household income, they're all equally represented so that we can get a good view of what different consumers are responding to, how their buying habits are changing, what their attitudes differ, across these different demographics. And so I also wanted to highlight exactly what you can expect when you're signing into Mintel through IU's subscription. So you'll see those libraries at the top. That's our typical academic package. Automotive, food is a really big category. Lifestyles is going to represent that marketing to Gen Z report. We have marketing to moms. We just came out with a marketing to dads report. So more demographical focused than industry focused. But then we have retailing, tech and media, travel. And then just to let you know, so they can see kind of the depth of research that we have. In 2020, we introduced a few new libraries. In this case, under this list, that was cannabis, culture and identity, e-commerce is a new one, flavor and ingredient trends, and then sports and gaming. So that's going to include, video games, esports, but then also that traditional gaming like baseball, soccer, all those different insights. But yeah, just note if any of these categories come across your desk, anything that you need to know with consumers in these categories listed here, Mintel is going to have research on. And then when it came to COVID, our reports are planned about a year or half a year in advance. So for example, in July 2020, as a company, we come together with our analysts, talking to our clients, and we're doing title planning for the following year. So that why I mentioned that is because all of our titles for 2020 were already confirmed, even when COVID came about. So we were having to shift pretty quickly to not necessarily eliminate or change any titles, but just note that with each one we were about to publish, we're going to have to put in insights and data that are showing how COVID is impacted by any one of our titles. So every single title we're publishing, as you can see here from the car purchasing process, which was likely affected by COVID pretty heavily since that's totally normally in person, to yogurt and yogurt drinks. How are consumers changing their purchase behaviors because of COVID? Were they purchasing more because they're more health minded? Were they purchasing less for some specific reason? All of these titles were updated in March of 2020 and on to include a section on the impact of COVID-19. So whether that was the analyst's point of view, with some of the surveys, we were able to include questions on how has COVID changed your behavior in regards to X. And then we also did introduce new titles because of COVID. And we were able to look at in-depth research and data into how COVID was affecting larger industries. So we didn't get as specific as yogurt and yogurt drinks, but we looked at the impact of COVID on food and drink retailing. So grocery shopping was a big one. Food service is there, technology, travel, consumers' relationship with financial services. So those were additional titles that we were able to create to benefit our clients. And so they can know, how COVID is virtually changing everything, but specifically a industry that they wanted to focus on. And then what else we introduced last year, I believe in the beginning of March, were our COVID consumer trackers. So we were able to quickly put together a weekly survey for consumers that was strictly about COVID. How is COVID changing your behavior? What's, high priority for you now versus what's low priority? In our next few slides, I'll actually show you one of our trackers, but just wanted to know that from March 2nd, I think was our first survey that we fielded. We were tracking across countries, but in the US specifically, we were able to do weekly updates. So you'll see in the next few slides here kind of what that looked like. So here we are. So again, this is a PowerPoint, but just note that any data or insights slides I have in here is going to be a content piece that's accessible to you on the Mintel portal. So again, I'll show you how to get to that stuff later, but just wanted to make sure we kind of do a good look at these trackers now so you can see what those behavior changes looked like. We asked a few questions, or probably I think 7 or 8. I'm just going to show you a few here just so you can take a look at what this looked like. So how worried are consumers right now? Looking at this graph, we take a look at exactly how we worded this question to consumers. So how worried are you about the risk of being exposed to the coronavirus, also known as COVID? And this is showing our data on a weekly basis from March to September 2020. In this case, we looked at a net view. So if people said very worried or somewhat worried, they're included in this chart. So not surprisingly, early March, US consumers weren't as worried. I don't think we had as many cases as we quite expected to, but quickly that grew and even shifted as we got into early summer, went back up in July and kind of hovered around that 55%. What are consumers taking? So what kind of behaviors are they paying attention to when, COVID came about? So in this case, we're looking at behavior changes due to COVID, and this is showing us from April to September. So some things we asked them about if they're doing that because of COVID includes trying to limit the time I spend in store, shopping more online, using curbside pickup or pick and collect more, shopping more from local businesses. So a lot of different attitudes and behaviors we were tracking to see how clients or how consumers were changing the way they were on a day-to-day basis, weekly basis because of COVID. And in July 28th to August 4th, 44% of consumers reported shopping more online, and that spiked up to 50% that next week. So as we all know, every day with COVID is a new day, a new stat, a new behavior we have to follow. And some of this data was really helpful in painting that story and paying attention to consumers. And then what are consumers prioritizing? So we took a look at how comfortable they are doing specific activities. We're looking at July to September in this case. We can see that in September, dining at a restaurant outside spiked up high, dining inside a restaurant even increased. I'm sure we can all agree that come October, November, there was another spike. So we may have changed our behaviors a little bit as well. But just a good idea to know, going to the gym, getting beauty treatments, going outside for a drink, a lot of these different behaviors, I think we all kind of toyed around with depending on where these COVID cases were at and the severity of the situation. So so what? Where do we look at this data and how do we use it? So ultimately, some of our analysts put together a 2021 American Consumer Trends piece. So really, we're looking at all this data that we have across categories within these COVID trackers. So, we know that brands, they need to stay on the balls of their feet, essentially. They need to pivot to the next normal, meet consumers' quickly changing needs. So this can mean anything from contactless or e-commerce offerings, food service shifting to in-home or delivery service, or even outside of food service as well, or ramping up production to meet higher levels of demand. So face masks, hand sanitizer come to mind in that case. And again, seize the opportunity. We find a lot of different, 3 in 5 Americans say they measure their personal success by their mental and physical health. We find that 7 in 10 prefer to spend money on experiences over things. So as things start to open up with a new vaccine in 2021, brands really and companies just really need to shift with consumers along with their behavior. If they're feeling safer, if they're not feeling quite as safe, brands just really need to stay on top of that in order to, adjust their own strategies appropriately. So again, looking at an actual report. So the Future of Food Service 2021 is a title that we just published a couple weeks ago. Again, this is on the Mintel site, so I won't stay in depth on some of these slides. You can get into yourself as well. But just wanted to show you kind of what these specific titles look like beyond just our general COVID trackers. So the Future of Food Service 2021. Again, our analysts are across our categories. We have experts. So in this case, Jill, she's our senior food service analyst. She is great. She wrote this report. So she wrote the survey questions, administered, and got that raw data back, and then was able to interpret it and make different insights and conclusions based on how consumers responded to a variety of questions as it pertains to food service. And what's great is this is actually a downloadable piece that I took from the report within the Mintel platform. And this is something that's available to you as well. So if you need a quick deck, we're looking at these top takeaways. This is something that you can download on your own and use for a project. So we're looking at don't count on dine-in. That's not a surprise here. Redefining the at-home experience and putting value at the forefront, especially if we look into a looming recession in the future. Consumers are always going to put the most emphasis on value of a product that they're going to buy. So with each report, we give a market overview. So you can see the quick dip in 2020 when it came to food service. Again, I'm going to skip through some of these just so we have some time to get into the actual platform. Just want you to see the different areas that we're covering as it pertains to food service. So within each of our new, within each of our titles, giving a COVID analysis on, what's the lockdown look like right now? What can we expect in the future? And then come the recovery period, what can brands and companies really expect? And how can they adapt to consumers appropriately? And then we look at opportunities and challenges, which is great. So now we're seeing some of those questions that we actually asked in this graph. So we took a look at, are you ordering takeout delivery from restaurants? And this graph is comparing consumers' responses from April 2020 to September 2020. So we can see in both cases, dine-in is really being replaced. People are much safer ordering from home, getting it delivered, or picking it up without having to spend that time outside and potentially being exposed. COVID exposure concerns spur far more plans to cook at home. Again, I think we're all doing that, cooking more at home as much as we can due to the pandemic. So again, looking at, are you planning to do more, the same, or less of the following in 2021 compared to 2020? So this is looking at cooking at home, which we can see in this purple box, 46% of consumers said they would cook more at home in 2021. The same, or less, or we have an option of I don't do this and don't plan on doing this next year. Value proposition, again, is going to be important. And I'm just going to go through a little bit of these so we can see. And then we're looking at some other great stats that we can pull in and those opportunities that these food service brands have. So engaging Americans in a new way at home since they can't come into your restaurants, meal kits, subscription meal delivery, virtual chef, bartender-led classes, all things that consumers have responded at different levels that they're interested in. And then again, this is Jill for you. And then here is Sarah. She is going to be your account director if you ever have any questions, and me as well. But just since we're here now, I'm going to go into the platform. Is my screen showing of the homepage? If anyone can give me a yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. So again, if you're going into the list of databases on IU's library, go to that M and find Mintel. And this is the page that you're going to come across to. So we're looking at the Mintel homepage that has really a lot of different content, which makes it so valuable. So yes, you have access to reports. You'll see the type of content that a piece is by this bottom right-hand corner. But there's also some various pieces of content our analysts are publishing as important stories break, as brands are doing innovative things that are also going to be written up and available to you. But in terms of finding the content that you want to find, first you'll see this search box. So you can see a couple of things I've already searched on my own, but it works just like Google. So you type in your keyword, say we're working on a project in coffee. I'm going to type that in, click the magnifying glass. And then again, like Google, the more that keyword is showing up in a piece of content, the higher we're going to see it on your search results. So we have a coffee and RTD coffee report, a coffee and tea tracker, which tracks coffee and tea on menus and food service specifically. We have food service coffee and tea. So a lot of different reports that are focusing on coffee. And in terms of navigation, If you are more concerned about recency over relevance, so relevance is looking again at that keyword, but say I want to find the most recent report Mintel has, this drop down is going to be available to me to switch to just newest first. So if it contains the word coffee in that piece of content, I'm looking at what's been published recently. So even this one, December 31st, we have food and drink nutrition claims report. We actually just came out with our RTD alcoholic beverages report. So I'm sure looking at White Claw, Truly, how all of those things have really exploded over the last couple of years. And then this is a good example of a nice lifestyles report. So social lives of singles, how do you capture the single consumer and how do they differ from someone who's married or, has partner, anything like that. And then another good navigational tactic that I like to use personally are filters. So this is going to give you really, a granular approach to the categories that you have access to. So we're looking at automotive. We can filter by beauty and personal care reports and even get as far as looking specifically at hair care or deodorants. Food, probably our largest category by far, publishing the most reports within the food category on a monthly basis. So we can see dairy and dairy alternatives. All these different filters are going to be super helpful to make sure that you're getting the content that you really need. Travel and leisure and entertainment, retail, and then by region. So when it comes to these reports, IU just has a subscription to the US consumer reports, but still relevant if you ever wanted to look at a region and just see what you have available to you. Demographics. So again, that lifestyles idea titles, we have multicultural reports. We have Gen Z, we're looking at millennials, and then we can get into teens, singles, babies and children, all those different, consumer groups that we want to look at or focus in on. And then we have a COVID filter, obviously new for last year. But if I want to focus on COVID content, which is quite honestly a lot of the content that we're publishing these days, since again, COVID is affecting so many different industries, it's just going to show me all content that's in your subscription that we have published with COVID Insights, which again is going to be a lot of them. So the one last thing I'm going to do is open one of these actual reports so you can see what it looks like and then just highlight a few pieces and then I'll pass the mic, I promise. So I'm going to open the Better For You Eating Trends. With any report that you open, this homepage is going to look the exact same. So we're going to see the title up here. We're going to see the analyst, the category expert who wrote this report. And then we have some downloadable pieces, which are really good if you're in a time restraint, if you want to know some insights from this report, but you just want to get, the top takeaways, then I would recommend downloading the executive summary. The full report, these are going to be 60 to 70 page reports. So very long. And I know plenty of people who like to read the whole thing top to bottom. But if that's not your preference, you can download some of these quicker resources to get a full overview. And then that report presentation. So this is the download I was mentioning that was actually in my previous PowerPoint. I utilized the report presentation from that Future of Food Service report title and used some of the slides. So again, we had those key takeaways available to us. The data book. So this is a really, really great resource. This is going to be all the raw consumer survey data that the analysts and us and Mintel got back from our consumer surveys. So we're looking at each different question we asked along with the breakdown by demographics. So if we want to look at how Gen Z responded to just these survey questions, we can download the data book and actually look at how Gen Z responded to each question as compared to other generations. I do not want to cut into my counterpart's time, so I'm going to stop there. But I have a few other things I would love to review, so I will share them with you, Alana, so that everyone here can get a good full view at Mintel. But I'll stop sharing for now and pass it over to Joe.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate that, and very interesting stuff. I learned a lot even from your portion of the presentation. So, Alana, is it okay if I jump right in, or was there anything that you wanted to mention in segue here?
Nope. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, okay, perfect. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, so let's jump right in. So Thank you both for the introduction. To reiterate, my name is Joe Mazur. I am the Senior Client Relationship Manager for the university here at IBISworld. Basically, I'm here to add as much value as I can to your subscription to help you navigate to the areas most relevant to you, to liaise with the analysts and economists who write our reports and answer additional questions and guide you towards further insights. But for today's purposes, I'll give a quick, very, very brief overview of who IBISworld is once again, but then jump into our COVID-19 tools and all the resources we've been rolling out that you now have access to. So going ahead, for anyone who isn't fully aware of IBISworld, I'll cover why the industry information matters, how it can help empower you, along with the information that Kelly just reviewed that Mintel provides. A lot of powerful information that can really set you up for success when coupling both of these resources together, it seems, from my limited experience of Mintel itself, but both, it seems like you're going to be in good hands with both resources. So we'll jump into how IBISworld is utilized and a tailored look at the website, more specifically at those COVID-19 tools. So first and foremost, I'm sure we both know that anecdotal information can be great. What you're seeing as you are out and about, living and breathing in this unique environment that we find ourselves in. But how can you truly tell how business is performing without the overall industry picture? So here at IBISworld, we try to provide that overall industry benchmarking and overall industry analysis. And thinking about that, how there can be hundreds, even thousands of external variables that have a significant impact on an industry. Many of those are outside of the control of any business, any industry operator. So, and now with COVID and this ongoing pandemic, there are even more conditions that impact an industry, from social distancing, government-imposed regulations, remote work environments. Alana had joked about how we're in Zoomington these days, and just being able to navigate the different challenges impacting us now is really something that consumers and businesses, everyone needs to be aware of. And now more than ever, no industry is acting in isolation. Industries are so deeply intertwined, and the effects of a fallout or a boom in one industry is directly going to affect adjacent industries. Now thinking about, kind of going off script here, thinking about how, for example, the commercial real estate industry is being impacted by COVID, with us in Zoomington and working from home, not going into offices anymore or on campus as much. Commercial real estate is taking a hit, but then what about all those other industries that are being affected as it trickles down the supply chain? You think about landscaping services not having some, as many, commercial real estate contracts as costs, expenditures change, and maybe more shifting towards residential, but different things like that. So and then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is a company's ability to survive and grow is tied in part to how the industry is operating, how the industry is being impacted by COVID. So with that in mind, how does it relate to our academic clients, building out some of those real world curriculum and connecting the dots between the classroom and the real world application, even to preparing for job interviews, students being able to understand, is an industry still growing at the same rate, as a result of the pandemic? Is this, how can I prepare for a career with these trends in mind? How am I going to set myself apart from the other hundreds of applicants preparing for these particular roles? So from here, I'm going to kind of get out of the whole PowerPoint and jump right into the database. We'll take a look at some of these new tools that you have access to that can help empower you with this type of information. So once I'm out of here, Can you all still see my screen? I'm in the IBISworld database now.
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. So this is what you would see when logging in through the library resources A to Z page. You click on IBISworld, you're going to get tossed right into the IBISworld database. First and foremost, sure, you can always type in, keyword searches or look for industries. What I always like to encourage now with everything going on is to click this drop down and go right into the industry insider. And what this is going to do is pull going to be a hot topic right now. So this is looking at all of our featured pieces across the board, across all of different markets. But if you wanted to look at just, for example, coronavirus specific insights, and if we were to look at just the US, I actually have that. I'll just drag it over from my other screen here. So coronavirus insights here in the US, you can look at things like building off of what Kelly was mentioning, how folks are a little bit more hesitant to dine indoors, go to restaurants and start ordering, to start ordering goods and services online, like groceries even, and cook at home. You can see things like that, how restaurants are being impacted, and a lot of times, we're all aware of the industries that are impacting us and how they're being affected. Oh, I can't get a haircut because of the coronavirus, or I feel uncomfortable going out to eat. But what other industries should we be aware of? So here you'll be able to find a series of different industry conditions, and in clicking into any of these, for example, when looking at the top 5 industries outperforming the U.S. economy, you can see that online grocery sales, that's one of the top 5. Cough and cold medicine, no surprise there. Online pet food and supply sales. But then you find industries like autonomous underwater vehicle manufacturing, which because the Department of Defense has changed its spending, that's an industry that's not being affected. It's not taking a hit. Or when you think of stock exchanges and commodity exchanges, increased volatility because of the pandemic, it's stimulating new investors and folks, getting involved in opening accounts and doing some investment, whether they or not they have some extra time on their hands, not commuting anymore, and deciding to do a little bit more investment related research. But here you'll be able to see all of these hyperlinked into the full industry database, or other coronavirus insights. This one looking at how the movie industry is being impacted, or I mentioned some others along the way with landscaping services, or telecommunications. There are so many industries. There's over 1,400 US industries in our database, and none of them act in complete isolation. So how do we go about, aside from looking at the coronavirus insights, how do we go about finding for ourselves how industries are being affected? So jumping back into the database, you can certainly type in industry titles, or coronavirus itself, and just see what industries are going to populate, or in this case, sectors. You can see on a sector by sector analysis how the coronavirus is affecting each of these. Or once we drill down into the 5-digit level, which is how the US Census and NAICS classifies an industry, how those particular industries are being affected by searching for something like coronavirus. So if we were to take a look at something like IT consulting, for example, you can certainly take a look at the coronavirus impact updates and see the top impacts that are affecting this particular industry and why this industry is being impacted by the coronavirus. But then you can also, search within the reports using the table of contents here. You can even type in keywords like coronavirus right into the search within the report section. And this will tell you where the coronavirus is being addressed, where we're providing additional commentary and insights and analysis, and how in this case IT consulting, with folks working remote and a much more complex IT environment for businesses, how they're evolving, how technology is disrupting this space, or different industries, how they're evolving with the pandemic. Another area where you can find a new resource, a new set of information. Because of the coronavirus, we've been rolling out many new tools and resources within products and markets. If you want to take a look at more of a drill down overview of how this particular industry or any industry is being affected by COVID in your geography, you can certainly look across the map and see the geographic spread of business activities by state, and why this industry has certain competitive advantages in different regions, whether it's due to population linkages or other supply chain variables. But now we can look at the impact of COVID-19 in just your state by clicking on the state. So as I'm sure we're all aware, the pandemic is affecting different geographies more than others. Back in March, I am in New Jersey, our office is in Manhattan. This was the epicenter of the pandemic, but it wasn't impacting areas like South Dakota as much, whereas now some of those areas, the cases have been rising and industries are being impacted more so there. So here you can see, on a state-by-state basis, what type of exposure on a rank of 1 to 50. In this case, Indiana has the 17th highest exposure to the economic impacts of COVID-19 for IT consulting. And then on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 represents the highest level of risk, what type of impact COVID has had on this industry. And then with a more detailed analysis and overview of county by county level, why certain areas are being impacted more, and then the spread of business activities within that state. And the way we developed this tool is through a lot of positive feedback we had received from rolling out our local data tool. Now, in regard to that, you'll see a new dropdown that says COVID-19. Don't worry about the shock assessment tool. That's more for commercial banks evaluating their portfolios. But what the university has access to is our local data tool, our trade exposure tool, and our COVID-19 impact tool. So in clicking into each of these, as mentioned, the ability to click on a state and get that deeper analysis for the local conditions was derived from our local data tool. So I can even start there for where we go from here. So this is going to look at localized conditions on a state and county level, and we'll be looking at local regulations, whether certain industries out of all 1,400 U.S. industries, whether some are deemed essential versus non-essential. We'll look at supply chain linkages. We'll look at different state actions. The ability to dine in, or if that's not allowed, or face coverings and different things like that. And then we'll look at specific industry data, employment data, establishment data for those local geographies. This we update every single week because the pandemic is changing on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So we're monitoring these conditions weekly. And in clicking these, it's going to pull you into an Excel sheet. It's a pretty hefty file, I will say so myself, so I downloaded it in advance. This cover sheet will basically describe what each of the data points are referencing and how we put together this document, this file. And this is dynamic, in which clicking into the search feature, you can pick and choose at a 6-digit NAICS level, different industries that operate within the US economy. So everything from coffee shops to frozen yogurt stores to trash removal and environmental remediation, everything in between. So here, being that it was a hot topic that Kelly was mentioning, I pulled up full service restaurants just to keep things relevant between us.
You didn't even plan this.
I know, just going on the fly here. So then from there, I chose the state of Indiana and I selected Marion County. And I imported the data, and this pulls it in real time. Once again, this uses macros through Excel files. So you're going to have to, when you pull up the Excel file, and I'll show you what I mean, you're going to have this yellow ribbon up top. You're just going to have to enable editing. And then it may ask you to enable macros, which is perfectly fine. It makes this a dynamic file. So you're going to import this data, and it's going to pull all the information in real time from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. From there, you'll be able to see on a localized level, how many employees from these different NAICS levels. So looking at the 2-digit sector level, which looks at all of the industries that operate within accommodations and food services, all the way down to the 6-digit level, in this case, full service restaurants. So to look at the localized percentage compared across the entire economy. And I have, don't worry, I'll send over some supporting documents that go into all of this data, but then you'll also see different state regulations and levels. You'll be able to look at the overall industry key statistics. You can look, state by state for different industries and look at, I mentioned the openness scale on that full report analysis before. So you can see how these different industries, whether or not they're still mainly closed or non-essential, or if they're trending towards being more open and allowing folks to utilize and go into locations or utilize its products and services. Here you can, in the NAICS openness tab, you can look across all states and all industries, and then you can even pull up state-specific actions and regulations, travel restrictions, face masks, closures of certain businesses, and so on. So all of this data is further analyzed and pulled together into that report that we were able to find within the business locations on a state-to-state level. Beyond that, we also have our COVID-19 impact tool, which will even go beyond that localized level, and we'll look at the main components impacting an industry, and we'll look at whether or not it's had a positive or negative impact on the industry. And a lot of times people ask, Joe, how could the pandemic positively impact an industry? What's that about? The economy is being impacted, and people's lives are in danger. When you think about video conferencing services, back in March, I myself, I never heard of Zoom. Microsoft Teams didn't exist. We weren't utilizing this to the same extent we are today. That industry has surged. We look at online grocery sales. I would always go into a grocery store and pick out the tomatoes that I wanted. I never ordered through Amazon, Whole Foods to get groceries delivered to me, but now that's a huge impact. So being able to see to what extent, positively or negative, and what direction a particular impact is moving. So this, again, updated weekly, pulls in an Excel file. Again, the covering sheet will go into more definition-based analysis of to help you understand everything going on, and you will need to enable editing as mentioned. From here, you're going to click into the Control tab, and this will allow you to select different impacts. So here you'll sorry, it looks like my screen froze on me. Can everyone still see my screen here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going into the Control tab, you'll be able to select different impacts and see what types of exposure that these impacts have had on different industries. So you can select particular industries or sectors. You can look at trading partners like different countries, different continents, different trade groups like NAFTA or the European Union. And then it will be able to, build out in real time these different supply chain models. As mentioned, this is looking at over a million different data points. So in clicking the run supply chain model, it may take a few moments, so I won't click that right now. But you'll be able to see the driver directions. So whether any supply chain disruptors or anything has provided opportunity for the supply chain with that trading partner group, and for what industries, whether it's positive, negative. You'll see social distancing impacts, whether it's very strong impact on, in this case, caterers in the US have had a strong impact as a result of social distancing regulations, or whether it's a low impact, when you're looking at beef cattle production. You'll look at macroeconomic drivers, supply chain impacts, so upstream and downstream supply chain industries that have been impacted. You'll be able to look at the availability of work from home. So construction related industries, you can't obviously work from home, whereas others, you have a stronger work from home availability, and different innovation triggers like the development of different online ordering systems and such. So that I can go into so much more information and details and drill downs here, but for the sake of time, feel free to reach out to me direct and I'll follow up with supporting details, but I'm happy to go into more detail into each of these individual tools. And then finally, very briefly, the trade exposure tool. This is updated every month because it's when the trade data is reported. And this is going to primarily look at the major Asian economies that the US does trade with. So here you'll be able to see, in this case, sectors and what percentage of trade we do with these different trade partners. As mentioned, you can drill a little further with specific countries and trade groups and continents in the impact tool, but this is if you want to take a look at just some major Asian economies. This is actually the first tool we developed when the coronavirus was primarily still impacting China before it trickled its way and made its way over here into the US. So with that, for the sake of time, I know we were told to leave a few minutes at the end for questions. So whether they're directed to myself or Kelly, we do want to be available here. We appreciate your time and we're just sheerly glad to be a part of this, this series, but happy to answer any questions that you have.
Definitely.
All right. So are there any questions that anyone had at this point? Anything come up? I guess I would say, like, what does it look like for your analysts right now at both of your companies? Like, are you guys all doing remote at this point? I know in Chicago, where Mintel's located, they used to have a big collaborative office. So I imagine that's very
Mm-hmm.
different. But like, how does it look? How does it look for analysts right now? Or because a lot of our students end up going into marketing analysts and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, in our Chicago office, we were not COVID appropriate pre-COVID, that's for sure. We had an open office. We didn't even have a assigned desk. We all jumped around so we could interact with, our analysts, with all these different components of Mintel to kind of get the most, I guess, for lack of a better word, exposure to other people in the office. But our analysts right now, yes, everyone's work from home. We do have, I think in a week, an update from our CEO on kind of where we're headed next. As everyone knows, I think our back to office dates kept being pushed back. As far as our analysts go, I mean, they're, as you can tell, some of the hardest workers at Mintel. We had a bit of a delay in report publishing when COVID first came about. So, a report that maybe was supposed to come out in April was pushed back to May, just with the extra load of including COVID data and insights to each report. But they've handled it fantastically. Everyone's just, at this point, we're almost at a year. So I think it's again, become the norm on how we're working. I think it'll definitely change how we work moving forward. But yeah, I think the analysts are intrigued to be challenged this way. I think that's what I've heard from most of them is, we're publishing this cheese report every year, and for the first time, it's really changing how they're writing these reports. So it's kept them on their toes for sure.
That's interesting. And we're here at IBISworld, we're seeing something similar. And we were actually fortunate enough to roll out this new My IBISworld platform last, December, I think it was. And with, production before that, a heavy investment in production into that. And the reason why we're benefiting from that now is because a lot of our information is automatically integrated. We built out our new site through API integration. So when some of this real-time data comes in, like with the local data tool, that can automatically get infused into the to the other sections that would be altered as a result. So it has taken a bit of the workload, a lot of the manual work off of the plates of our analysts, and everything is still done in-house here. We still have a team of, I mean, last I saw them, about 80 in-house analysts and economists, maybe more now. But everyone's obviously working remote, because similar to Kelly and her office environment, us being in a 70-story building, even just getting in an elevator could be a potential risk. So we have not been going into the office. We have all been working remote and taking advantage of video conferencing services and just a whole new level of collaboration. But then, like I said, the automation aspect of their roles has really helped us fast track new innovation and new resources and new tools that look at the coronavirus specifically, while keeping all of our other industry reports up to date with information as we receive it.
All right, and we did have a question in the chat, which is, how would each of you clarify the differences between platforms like Mintel and IBISworld in terms of it? And to clarify, we do subscribe to both of them, so no one has to feel like they have to choose one. But in terms of, like what I would think, like what types of data you have, because they're often two sides of the same coin, I would say.
Sure, I would say with Mintel, it's always the consumer, so very consumer focused, consumer attitudes, consumer behaviors. We do have a tool that measures, market size, as they say, with kind of looking at that sales piece. But I think you think consumers and you think Mintel, we're asking them directly how they feel or their behaviors or attitudes towards a specific category. And again, I couldn't get into the nitty gritty of the different report titles that we have, because they do get very specific, again, like that yogurt and yogurt drinks, not so high level. So I think the granularity in the categories we cover and also the consumers is definitely, where Mintel shines. But Both great platforms, of course.
Yeah, and I would say from an IBISworld perspective, we are primarily industry intelligence and looking at the
Right.
broader industry overall. So sure, there's always going to be an aspect of how consumers impact an industry, but then there are other industries that are impacted by different uh, economic and financial data and different markets there. So we're taking a slightly different approach, but I can see how they can be, very powerful when used in conjunction, both resources.
Yeah, very complimentary for sure.
Awesome. And we are at time. So thank you so much, Joe and Kelly, for coming. And we'll be sure to, if there's any additional materials, everyone who registered to this session will get access. I've also been recording this, and I'm hoping to put this up on the library's YouTube channel so others can watch this as well. But for everyone out there, thanks so much for this presentation. Thank you so much for coming, and hope to see you next week when we look at some geographic information systems using Simply Analytics, looking at social science data. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having us, Alana.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.